at every annual IEP, we should be reviewing the progress on prior goals. What are some ways that you document this? What verbiage are you using, and how would you document a parent disagreement with progress on a goal?
I like to make discussion about goals in my IEP notes very clear, right? So goal 1, title, any team discussion related to that goal, whether the student met the goal or did not meet the goal, and move on. I think it's nice to have a really clear, concise description of what the goals are, whether or not the student met each goal, and any conversation about each goal on that notes page, because it really helps to drive and support whatever the narrative of that IEP discussion was, right? However that IEP discussion moved along, because the goals are going to be an important component of that conversation.
One of the things I like to do too is ask the parent, are they in agreement with the goal, and do they have any questions about the goal? And so then also document that. But if a parent is not in agreement, then we want to document that parent is not in agreement with the goal, and then you want to document the discussion and how it was resolved for the team, how you resolve the parent's concern regarding that goal.
Another thing, in addition to that, is that if you have a goal that was only partially met or not met, you can say the team discussed the goal and modified the goal, and it will be continued on the new IEP. So remember, we don't just want to drop a goal that's not met or only partially met. So this focuses around the discussion of how to modify the goal to make it effective and appropriate for the student.
Another thing I'm careful to include when we're looking at progress on prior goals and proposed new goals is I like to document the data that teachers are presenting or work samples that are shared in the meeting. If it's not documented in the notes, it quite often gets left out. Yeah. We use that data and documentation to develop the goals, but if there's a disagreement about a goal, whether or not it was met or why a goal is being proposed, our data really is the foundation of why we are marking goals met and not met, and why we're developing new goals for future progress. So documenting in the notes the data being shared with the parent is the foundation of why the goals were developed to begin with.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And you don't need to go crazy with it. You can add it in there quickly. Teacher shared a work sample related to this goal. Student is at 60% accuracy or whatever. You don't have to copy and paste an Excel spreadsheet in there. Make it simple to document that you had that conversation.
Now, one other question. I know taking notes during the meeting sometimes is a challenge. People talk fast, others slower. But Brian, you mentioned that you like listing out the goals, goal 1, let's say writing production. Would you, before the meeting, go into the notes, maybe under review of prior goals, and pre-write the names of the goals, so then it's quicker to catch up the conversation?
That would certainly be helpful. What I do is I use a Google document. I know we've talked about that a little bit in the past. I use a Google Doc, and I just have my little goal area on my notes template pre-formatted to be numbered. So I just can click on number 1, and then as soon as I hit enter to write the title of the next goal, I already have it formatted that way. So that makes it a little bit easier. That's one way you could do it. But I think adding those titles in beforehand would certainly help. Not only document that you went through each goal, but that would certainly help drive the conversation to make sure you addressed each goal as well.
Well, I think this is a good segue into the next slide that we have. And what you mentioned in being crystal clear in why we review the goals and whether or not the student met them, didn't meet them, and the conversation. I've read notes, I'm sure all of you have. I've probably taken notes and just typed in there, new goals read, new goals reviewed. And over time, you develop better best practices. So what sort of details do each of you include in the notes when you're reviewing new goals? Do you call them draft goals, proposed goals? Give us some hints. What would you put?
I typically call them proposed goals. They could be drafted goals, but I usually call them the goals that we're proposing to the team for the student to have educational benefits. So I put them in as proposed new goals and share them with the team.
Yeah, and it's important to discuss those new goals and discuss any parent concerns or team input regarding those new goals and document the discussion around each new goal. So as you list each proposed goal, document the discussion surrounding each proposed goal. So if the parent had a comment about how this goal was going to be measured, or a parent had a question about whether this goal would be addressed by the speech and language pathologist or by the special education teacher, document those discussions, document those areas of concern in the notes page as well.
So it sounds like what you were saying is if there was disagreement with the goals, language or things like that, you would also document specifically what was changed in the revised goal? Mm-hmm. Or would you leave it the same? What would you put in the notes?
What I typically put is, here's the drafted goal. Here are the discussions around the drafted goal. And if that drafted goal was changed, I mean, I'm not going to go through the entire goal verbatim in the notes page, right? That's what the goal page is for. But I might make references to changes we made to the drafted goal. Team decided to change the percentage of accuracy in goal number 2 to 85% rather than 80% or whatever. So if I'm making changes, I'm documenting those there and the discussion regarding those changes, but I don't think the entire text of whatever goal is eventually agreed upon is necessary in the meeting notes. If we're carrying a goal over, I think it's important to document that we're carrying a goal over, how that goal was modified and why we're carrying it over, and whatever changes we're using or whatever changes that we're implementing on that goal that we're deciding to carry over. Because we need to show progress, we need to show educational benefit. If we do decide to carry over a goal, that goal should be modified and instructional practices being used to address that goal should be modified, discussed, and documented as well.
All right, so how would you document parent agreement with the goals? What would you write?
I kind of make it quick and easy at the very end of the notes discussion, or at the very end of the goals discussion. I'll say parent is in agreement with all of the goals as written.
The only change I would make to that, Michelle, is that if there's a goal that's contested, I might list parent is in agreement with goals, blah, blah, blah. Parent is in disagreement with or would like to further consider goal, whichever goal that was.
So Brian, some things that you mentioned sparked something that I experienced, a memory of something I experienced. I was involved in a CDE comprehensive review for ed benefit. And one thing that we kept referencing were the notes of the IEP to understand why goals may have been carried over and not changed. And what we encountered was a student who had 2 IEPs sequentially, and the goals were identical for the most part. There was one word changed, but effectively it really didn't change the function of the goal or what they were working on, the skill. So we would always go to the notes to try to understand what happened. Was the goal partially met? Did they get to 40% and not 80%? What was the rationale for keeping the goals? Well, the notes only said new goals reviewed, goals carried over. There was no rationale. And when it's just, you try to understand, you read the notes to understand what happened at the meeting. It paints the picture for us about how we arrived at that destination. And in this case, there wasn't enough in the notes to help us understand.
Yeah, and I've had a student in the past that had a similar concern. And I know that we documented in the notes very, very carefully that the student developed a seizure disorder and therefore was regressing very quickly as we were trying to make progress. So in that case, the repeated goals each year make sense, but the notes were the thing that really held it together so that it was clear why they kept repeating.